I was at a local diner a few days ago, sitting near a man who was visibly shaken. He was staring at a headline on his phone about autonomous trucks, and he kept shaking his head, murmuring to anyone who'd listened that the machines are finally coming for us. He described AI like a cold, metallic shadow creeping across the workforce, something that would leave him and everyone he knew obsolete by next Tuesday. To him, the future wasn't a promise. It was a pink slip delivered by an algorithm. He was practically pleading for the government to wrap the whole thing in red tape and shut it down before the job market was completely stifled. But then, a woman sitting at the counter turned around. She didn't look like a tech mogul or a scientist. She just looked relieved. She told him about her mother, who had been diagnosed with a condition that just a few years ago would have meant a long, painful decline. But last month, a surgical robot, the Da Vinci system, had performed a procedure with a level of precision no human hand could ever replicate. She spoke about the rivers on her cheeks finally drying up, not because of a miracle, but because of a machine.
She asked him, should we really shackle the technology that holds back the fading breath of a mother? In an instant, the man's expression changed. The anger was replaced by a look of profound confusion. He was caught in that strange modern contradiction, hating the force that threatens his routine while quietly realizing it might be the very thing that saves his family. We often treat AI like a waterfall, menacing and intimidating when you're standing at the bottom, but a mesmerizing force of beauty and progress once you understand its flow. It makes you wonder, are we so focused on the 85 million jobs that might shift that we're willing to ignore the 97 million new opportunities and the lives being saved in the process? Are we going to be held hostage by our own fears, or are we ready to see AI not as a bullet, but as our ultimate salvation? If we focus only on the shadow, we might just end up putting a humongous dead end on human potential. So that moment in the diner, that feeling of being caught between those two extremes, the fear and the hope, that's exactly where we are right now, isn't it?
It really is. It perfectly captures that tension, the terror of your world changing versus this profound moral need for the very thing that's causing the change.
Exactly. And looking through the research we've pulled for this deep dive, it feels like we're way past just a simple debate about jobs.
Oh, way past. That's the framing we're used to, right? Jobs versus progress. But the sources we're looking at today, they suggest the stakes are so much higher. We're not just talking about the economy. We're talking about, the fundamental physics of how a civilization runs.
The physics of civilization.
Yeah, and the right to control your own thoughts, your own intelligence. And even at the end of the day, what it means to be biological. It goes that deep.
Wow. Okay, so physics, sovereignty, biology, that's a huge canvas. But they're all connected, right? They're not separate issues.
They're completely connected. They're three threads of the same story. And I think to really get a handle on it, we should walk through three narratives that really jumped out from the research. So first, there's a story about a failing power grid that'll help us understand this idea of accelerationism. Then there's a researcher who's fighting against censorship, which gets us into decentralization.
Right.
And finally, a philosopher who's facing cognitive decline, and that forces us to look at transhumanism head on.
So we're basically drawing a map from where we are now, what a lot of people are calling the Great Stagnation, to a type 2 civilization. Is that the end goal here?
That's the mission, yeah. We're going to try and unpack why slowing down, what that guy in the diner was begging for, why that might actually be the most dangerous thing we could possibly do.
Okay, let's do it. Let's jump into that first story. The failing power grid. This one really hit home for me.
Yeah, it's a powerful one.
So I came across this report about an old industrial town somewhere in the Midwest. And you have to picture, this isn't some shiny futuristic city. This is a place where the rust is winning, where the infrastructure is just slowly giving up.
Entropy in action.
Total entropy. And at the heart of it is this engineer, let's call him Elias. He's sitting in a control room that's probably full of, old buzzing monitors and binders full of safety protocols from 1995.
I can picture it perfectly. The air probably smells like stale coffee and ozone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those binders, that red tape, it's not just paper. It's become this physical force that stopped any real upgrades for decades. Elias can see the power grid is failing. Brownouts are becoming a regular thing.
But the official simulations, the ones run by the regulators, they say what? It's too risky to change anything.
That's it. The models are throttled by this ideology of safetyism, so they keep spitting out the same answer.
Yeah.
Don't touch it, you might make it worse.
Which is the classic institutional response. Avoid risk at all costs, even if the building is already on fire.
Right. But Elias knows the grid is dying anyway. Doing nothing isn't safe. It's just a slower way to fail.
Yeah.
So he does something pretty radical. He goes off the books.
Okay.
He bypasses all the official centralized servers. He's got this custom rig he built, and he runs a totally unrestricted, high-powered AI model. He just feeds it all the raw, unfiltered data from the grid.
And what happens?
In 3 hours. 3 hours. The AI identifies a thermodynamic equilibrium that entire committees of human engineers had missed for 20 years. It reroutes everything, balances the load perfectly, and it doesn't just fix the grid, it starts generating a surplus of energy.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a little scary, the idea of unrestricted code running our power grid. But then you look at this dying town and you realize that unrestricted just meant effective. It meant survival. It was a moral choice to fight back against the decay.
That phrase you just used,
Yeah.
fighting back against the decay, that is the perfect way to understand the philosophy behind what Elias did. That action, bypassing the bureaucracy to let pure intelligence solve the problem, that's a real-world application of a movement called effective accelerationism.
Right, 86. I see that tag everywhere online on tech people's profiles. But honestly, it usually just gets written off as, tech bros wanting to move fast and break things. But you're saying it's more than that.
It's so much deeper than that. It's not a business slogan. It's a worldview rooted in physics, in thermodynamics.
Okay, break that down for me.
So at its core, Itzhak says that the only way to solve our biggest problems, poverty, climate change, war, is through unrestricted technological progress, specifically with AI. But the why is the interesting part. The argument, which comes from people like Guillaume Bourdon, who you might know as a Basebef Jesus online.
Former Google physicist, right?
That's him. The argument is that the universe is fundamentally lazy. It trends toward disorder, toward chaos. That's entropy.
The second law of thermodynamics, right? Everything falls apart. Things cool down, systems break.
Exactly. It's the default state of everything. And life, all life, from a single cell to a whole civilization, is this miraculous little engine that fights against entropy. It consumes energy to create pockets of order.
So building a city is an anti-entropic act.
The profoundly anti-entropic act. And the IACEC movement takes this idea, borrowing from physicists like Jeremy England, and says that the purpose of intelligent life is to get better and better at fighting entropy. It's to climb what's called the Kardashev gradient.
Okay, the Kardashev scale. That feels like pure sci-fi. Talk about alien civilizations. How does that apply to us here and now?
Well, it's just a way of measuring a civilization's energy use. A type I civilization can harness all the energy on its planet. A type 2 can harness its entire star. Right now, we're not even a type Y. We're still, arguing over burning dead plants.
Right.
The accelerationist argument is that our survival depends on climbing that ladder. We have to get to type 1, then type 2, and Elias's town, it was failing because entropy was winning. The grid was decaying. The bureaucracy was stagnant. That's a system with very high entropy.
So the safetyism, the red tape that was supposed to protect the town, was actually the agent of decay. It was helping entropy win.
That is the absolute core of the argument. The
Yes.
people who want to slow down, who they call decels, or the doomers who want to pause AI development, from an EEC's perspective, they are actively working against the preservation of consciousness.
Because they're choosing stagnation.
They're choosing stagnation, which is just a slower death. If Elias had listened to the decels, the lights would have gone out, period. By accelerating, by injecting a massive amount of intelligence into the system, he reversed the entropy.
It totally flips the AI safety debate on its head. The conventional wisdom is slow down to be safe. This says, no, speed is safety, because standing still means you're in a sinking ship.
Precisely. And this isn't a new idea, really. It has roots in philosophers like Nick Land, who saw technocapitalism as this unstoppable autonomous force. The ACK folks just put an optimistic spin on it. They're saying, if we unleash this force, we break through the stagnation, we solve the problems.
It's very much in line with Mark Andreessen's Techno-Optimist Manifesto. This belief that technology is our only real engine for growth. And if we turn it off, we're not just pausing. We're choosing to decline.
And that's the moral weight Elias felt. It wasn't about being reckless. It was a recognition that the human system, the committees, they just didn't have the cognitive bandwidth to solve the problem anymore. The AI did. And to shackle it would have been, in his view, profoundly immoral.
Which brings up the next critical question, right? Who gets to use that tool? Elias could do what he did because he had the access and the freedom. But that's getting harder and harder.
Yes, it is.
And that leads us right into our second story. And it's about the digital cage that's being built around this technology as we speak.
Right. If acceleration is the engine, we have to talk about who controls the ignition.
Exactly. So I was following this story online about a freelance researcher. Let's call her Amara. She lives somewhere with really heavy internet censorship. And everything she sees online is filtered through these state-approved AI layers.
Marketed as safety, I'm sure.
Of course, protecting you from misinformation. But for Amara, it was a cage. She was trying to find a cure for a local waterborne illness, a real-life problem affecting her community. But the safety filter kept blocking her access to raw medical data. It was flagged as, unverified or sensitive by the central authority.
The classic justification for control. Safety becomes the excuse for censorship.
And she's not some political dissident. She's just a scientist trying to help people. Eventually, she finds a way to connect to what was described as a decentralized sovereign technology stack.
Okay.
It's basically a mesh network of computers that no single government or company can shut down. And on that network, she deploys her own private AI agent, one that hasn't been, as she put it, lobotomized by corporate alignment teams.
So it's uncensored intelligence.
Exactly. It lets her access the banned data sets, cross-reference them, and she finds the cure. And her story, for me, just crystallized this choice we're facing. The choice between centralized safety, which is really just control, and decentralized sovereignty, which is empowerment.
Amara's story is the perfect counterpoint to Elias's. If he showed us why we need to accelerate, she shows us the danger of letting that acceleration get captured by a central power. Right now, we're living in what some critics call the era of hyperscale enclosures.
Enclosures?
Yeah.
Like fencing off the town commons.
That's the metaphor. You've got OpenAI, Google, Meta. They are hoarding the data. They are hoarding the compute. They're building these giant walled gardens of intelligence. They control the APIs. And crucially, they control the alignment.
They get to decide what the AI is allowed to think.
They do. And for Amara, those filters weren't protecting her. They were a bottleneck on scientific discovery, a bottleneck on truth.
So she connected to this decentralized stack. That sounds a lot like what people in the crypto world call DePIN, right?
Yeah.
Decentralized physical infrastructure.
That's exactly what it is. It's like a public commons for AI. Instead of renting your intelligence from a single giant landlord like Google, you tap into a global peer-to-peer network.
Something like BitTensor, maybe?
BitTensor is a perfect example. It's essentially a marketplace for intelligence. Thousands of different computers all over the world are competing to provide the best AI models. The key is there's no CEO. There's no central committee that can decide Amara's research is unsafe. It's permissionless.
And it's not just the models, it's the hardware too. I saw some notes on the Akash network, which they call a decentralized AWS.
Right. Akash connects people who need processing power with a global network of idle GPUs. It can drop the cost of compute by like 70 and 90%. And that is fundamental to sovereignty. If you can't afford the compute, you're not free. You're just a tenant in someone else's digital empire.
This all seems to come down to the hardware, the actual silicon, which reminds me of this deep dive we found on Grok, spelled G-R-O-Q.
Yeah, and its founder, Jonathan Ross, a fascinating story.
He created the TPU, the main AI chip at Google, but then he left. Why?
He left because he saw what he called artificial scarcity being created. He was worried that if only a handful of hyperscalers owned all the best chips, they would become the absolute gatekeepers of the future. He wanted to break that monopoly.
And their chip, the LPU language processing unit, is how they're doing it. What makes it so different from the standard GPU from, say, NVIDIA?
It all comes down to one word: determinism. A GPU is a graphics chip, fundamentally. It's great at doing a lot of things at once, but it has to guess or speculate on what data it's going to need next. This creates inconsistent speeds. It creates lag.
Right. It's like asking a question, and sometimes you get an answer instantly, and sometimes you have to wait 5 seconds. It feels clunky.
It does. It breaks the flow. The Grok LPU gets rid of the guesswork. It's deterministic. It knows exactly where every piece of data is at every single moment. It's not improvising like a jazz musician. It's conducting a symphony from a perfect score. And the result is inference speeds up to 18 times faster than a GPU.
And that speed isn't just a nice-to-have feature. It changes everything. An AI that responds instantly feels like a part of your own mind. An AI that lags feels like a slow search engine.
That's it. That immediacy is crucial for what Jonathan Ross calls compute sovereignty. He has this great quote: countries that control compute will control AI. which is why you see Gluck making these huge geopolitical moves like partnering with Aramco in Saudi Arabia.
That seems like a contradiction, though. A company focused on decentralization partnering with a giant state-owned enterprise.
It does on the surface, but you have to see it as a shift away from a unipolar Silicon Valley-centric world. It's about creating a multipolar world where different regions and nations have their own sovereign compute infrastructure. It's about making sure that no single entity, whether it's the US government or a tech giant in California, can flip the off switch on the world's intelligence.
Okay, so let's piece this together. Elias shows us we need to accelerate to fight entropy. Amara shows us we need that acceleration to be decentralized so everyone has access. But then there's the final bottleneck, us, our own biology.
Yes.
The wetware.
Even with infinite energy and total freedom, our brains are still limited. They slow down, they decay. And that brings us to the third story, which is, honestly, it's the most challenging one to think about.
This is where we go from saving the system to saving the self.
Yeah. I saw this clip from a documentary about a philosopher, Dr. Eris, a man whose whole life, his whole identity was his mind. And he was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. He was literally watching his own organic intelligence hit a wall.
The great stagnation, but inside his own head.
Exactly. But instead of just accepting it, he becomes one of the first people to get a neural integrated AI interface, a direct link between his brain and, well, a computational cloud.
A bridge.
A bridge. And you see this moment where the biological decline is just bypassed. He doesn't just get his memory back. He starts processing information on a scale no biological human ever could. He starts writing these incredible papers on energy physics, the kind of stuff that could actually get us to that type 2 civilization we were talking about.
Wow. And I have to admit, it's unsettling to watch. This idea of merging with a machine, you worry about losing the soul or the self or whatever you want to call it. But looking at the footage of him, the clarity in his eyes, it wasn't an end. It was a liberation from the ultimate scarcity, which is our own biological limit.
What Dr. Eris represents is the final piece of the puzzle. Elias fixed the energy problem. Amara fixed the access problem. Eris is fixing the intelligence problem. And this brings us right to the economic and philosophical idea of the end of scarcity.
The post-scarcity world. It always sounds like science fiction. Star Trek replicators. But you're saying economists are actually modeling this now.
They are, very seriously. There's this analysis from Anton Korenek that puts it in historical context. For most of history, we were in the Malthusian age, limited by food. Then the Industrial Revolution hit, and labor became the scarce resource. We needed people to run the machines.
And because labor was scarce, it had value. That's the basis of our entire economic system. Wages, jobs, all of it.
Precisely. But the age of AGI, which Dr. Eris is entering, changes the game completely. Suddenly, machines aren't just substitutes for physical labor, they're perfect substitutes for cognitive labor, too.
So if an AI can write a better legal brief than a lawyer and a robot can build a better house than a construction worker, then labor and ideas are no longer scarce.
They become what are called reproducible factors. You can just print more. And that's terrifying from our current perspective because what's left? What has value?
Yeah, if my job and my ideas are worthless, what am I?
And that's where this concept of an epistemic inversion comes in. As the cost of generating new ideas and solutions drops to basically zero, the economy has to flip. The scarcity is no longer in finding the answer. The scarcity is in asking the right question.
So it's not about how do we do it. It's about what should we be doing.
Exactly. One theorist, Christian Callahan, calls this the experiential matrix. The value shifts away from production and toward alignment, aligning all this godlike power with actual human flourishing, with meaning, with care, with what makes life worth living. We go from being the cogs in the machine to being the artists who decide what the machine should create.
And Dr. Eris took that a step further. He didn't just direct the AI, he became part of it. He merged with it.
Because he realized the ultimate scarcity isn't good ideas, it's time, it's consciousness, it's the biological decay he was fighting.
And there's a theory in the source material that in this kind of world, human life itself takes on infinite value. How does that work?
It's almost a mathematical argument. If you can overcome biological death, if consciousness can be preserved indefinitely like Eris was attempting, then the potential for future experience becomes infinite.
And if the value of a life is infinite, then things like war or destruction become totally irrational. The cost is infinite.
The ultimate deterrent. It reframes the entire purpose of a civilization. You're no longer competing for scarce resources. You're cooperating to preserve and expand this infinitely valuable thing called consciousness. Dr. Eris wasn't just saving himself. He was a proof of concept for escaping the Malthusian trap of our own bodies.
Man. We started with a guy in a diner worried about autonomous trucks, and we've ended up at the potential for immortal cooperative consciousness.
But it's all connected. That man in the diner sees AI as a threat, as a competitor for his scarce job in a scarcity-based world. But Elias and Amara and Eris, they show us that AI isn't a competitor, it's the escape hatch.
The escape hatch from entropy.
From all kinds of entropy. Elias escaped thermodynamic entropy, the physical decay. Amara escaped political entropy, the decay of free thought. And Eris escaped biological entropy.
Death.
It just completely reframes the entire conversation around safety. We're told safety means slowing down, being careful. But in all these stories, the human way was the failing grid, the censored data, the dying brain. The machine was what brought life back. And that is the absolute core of the accelerationist argument we started with. Stagnation is not safety. Stagnation is decay. True safety, the only kind that matters in the long run, is about preserving consciousness and expanding our potential. And that requires moving forward, not standing still.
So what's the takeaway for all of us listening to this right now?
I think it leaves us with a very clear, if very stark, choice. We are moving out of a world defined entirely by scarcity. Scarcity of energy, scarcity of information, scarcity of time. But to reach the abundance on the other side, we have to make a choice about this tool. We can cling to the shadow that the man in the diner feared. We can try to wrap the future in red tape, or we can step into the flow. We can recognize that this transition isn't about AI replacing us. It's about us merging with the intelligence we've created to build a future where the lights stay on, where the cages are all open, and where the fading breath of a mother is just another problem we know how to solve. We've spent our entire history as passengers on this ride of evolution. We've just been handed the keys. We're in the pilot seat now.
That's a powerful place to end. It's daunting, for sure, but it's also incredibly hopeful.
I think it's the only story that has a future.
Thanks for breaking all that down.
My pleasure.